Hi everyone, today I'll be watching Why Are Pokemon with No Weaknesses So Bad by Mr. VGC. That's Wolfie. He's like over here. Anyways, hi, I'm Maple. I like Pokemon. I'm gonna go to the React core and we can just get started. And I guess before the Incineroar counter like starts. Woo, Incineroar, whoa, anyway. Okay, there we go. You have to get that out of the way. That's like necessary for a Wolfie video anyway, so I'm just like doing him a favor. You have to trust me on this. Ugh.
Weaknesses are a core part of the Pokemon experience. Whether you're a new player about to learn the hard way that your Charmander is weak to rock types, or a seasoned Nuzlocke seconds away from discovering a niche coverage move that an in-game trainer has, knowing which types your Pokemon are weak to is a vital skill. And that's especially true in competitive Pokemon, where hitting a Pokemon with an optimized, super effective move can often get rid of it in a single attack. So you might think that if there were any Pokemon that didn't have a single weakness, they would be some of the best in the game.
You'd think, but oh, a white screen, oh my god. Yeah, for me, I remember, I want to say most Pokemon type charts, and every now and then, I just completely forget one and go, oh shit. Oh shit, I forgot that was weak to whatever.
Move can often get rid of it in a single attack. So you might think that if there were any Pokemon that didn't have a single weakness, they would be some of the best in the game. What's surprising is not only are there a small handful of Pokemon that don't—
I could tell this one is most likely just Spiritomb because he's like the most circular. One of them's gotta be like Sableye, right? Because they had like the same thing back in Gen 3 and 4. Where, the Ghost Dark typing just didn't have any weaknesses. Fairy came along later, and that kind of, you know, solved the I don't have any weaknesses type shit. But until then, they were kind of the only ones.
Don't have any weaknesses, but across the board, they're so terrible that they almost never see any competitive play. Why? It's not that having no weaknesses is secretly a bad thing. In a vacuum, it absolutely should be incredible. And there's a Pokemon we'll talk about later that it kind of cheats in order to get no weaknesses, but it is the one example of a Pokemon with no weaknesses.
It'd be so funny if you just put Incineroar here.
Actually being really good. And again, I'm really only talking about competitive play here. Like, I do still have nightmares about kid me trying to take down Cynthia's Spiritomb, or, you know, the dreams of Terra Electric Air Balloon Shedinja. But since these aren't relevant in competitive play, they're also not making it into the video. For the most part, the ways in which you end up with no weaknesses tend to leave you with other deficiencies. Not to mention that while Pokemon's typing and weaknesses play a large role in how good it is, there are tons of other things at play here too. Just like how being really tall doesn't inherently mean you're going to be playing in the NBA, having no weaknesses doesn't mean a Pokemon can definitely keep up with Incineroar around. This is
mentioned again!
All going to be a lot easier to understand with an example. So let's talk about the specific Pokemon that don't have any weaknesses, starting with Spiritomb. Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. Can you even see me pointing? Wait. Okay, you can't see me.
You guys can't see me pointing, but like I point a lot during these reacts. Like when Incineroar like popped up. Point. Incineroar!
Pointing. Wait.
Pointing.
I know that some of you are running to the comments to tell me that Spiritomb actually does have weaknesses.
But actually, Fairy's not real, but actually...
But when it was released, it wasn't. Pump the brakes, kid. Spiritomb is a Ghost and Dark type Pokemon, and prior to Generation 6, this type combination had no weaknesses. That's because Ghost's only two weaknesses, Ghost and Dark, are both resisted by Dark. And
they also got really nice immunities too, because like Dark type is immune to Psychic, and then Ghost is immune to like normal and fighting. So having like all those immunities it's really nice, you know? I think the main things he's gonna probably bring up for like the Spiritomb and like Sableye, since they share the same typing, right? Sableye has less than 400 BST, and then I guess he does have a Mega Evolution, which gives him another 100 BST. But you probably still want to just Mega Evolve somebody else. That's gonna be my guess. I don't know. We'll watch the video.
Dark's weaknesses to fighting and bug, Ghost is either completely immune to or resists. In other words, these two types perfectly complement each other. Kind of.
Kinda.
There are a few issues with this type combination, but one of the glaring ones is that neither Dark or Ghost offers that many resistances. They each provide 2 plus 1 or 2 immunities respectively. Compare this to Steel, which provides 10 resistances and an immunity, or even Fire, which provides 6 resistances, and you might be able to spot the problem. Dark and Ghost canceling out each other's weaknesses also means they're canceling out their resistance.
Oh yeah, the resistances. And also I feel like Ghost and Dark tend to cover very similar types for like offensive wise, you know? Cause let's see. They both hit Psychic for like super effective. So I feel like Ghost and Dark just have a lot of overlap when it comes to offenses as well.
And so when you combine them, you get a Pokemon with only a single resistance in addition to 3 immunities. And resistances are arguably as big a deal as weaknesses in competitive play, if not even more so. While a weakness will cause a move to deal double damage, a resistance causes the base damage to be halved. A Pokemon with tons of useful resistances normally doesn't mind having a few weaknesses, even if they end up being double weaknesses. Pokemon like Ferrothorn, Gastrodon, Kingambit, and several others are all known to be really hard to get rid of quickly, despite having a type that deals quadruple damage to them. While a Pokemon without weaknesses won't have many bad matchups based on their typing, a Pokemon without resistances won't have many good ones. This lands Spiritomb in this kind of neutral zone, where based on its typing, it shouldn't have super volatile matchups. Or I should say based on its defensive typing. As a Ghost and Dark type, Spiritomb has some major issues offensively. Ghost is able to hit 2 types for super effective damage: Ghost and Psychic. Dark, on the other hand, is able to hit 2 types for super effective
Wait, this is what I mentioned earlier. They have like very overlapping offensive coverage.
damage.
Ghost and Psychic. Yeah!
Hey, these types have perfect offensive redundancy. It's a fun word to say, redundancy. Redundant sparse. While there are some cases where Dark can hit something for super effective damage that Ghost can't, and vice versa, for the most part, having either Dark or Ghost type coverage would be fine. Not to mention that neither Ghost or Dark type Pokemon can hit opposing Dark types. So there's an entire type that our neutral zone Spiritomb can't handle. Now, I don't want to give you the idea that Pokemon in the neutral zone, or even Pokemon in the mostly neutral zone with one scary corner, are inherently bad. Pokemon like Porygon 2 and Cresselia both exist in a similar space, where their typing is more or less irrelevant to the jobs that they want to do, minus a handful of bad matchups. But the obvious difference between Spiritomb and the Ducks is, of course, their stats.
I'm just like taking in that like Cresselia and Porygon 2 are, I don't know, they give me the same vibe here. Cresselia is just pointier because she's the moon, but they kind of got like the same body shape going on. I don't know why that just came across, but now you guys have to deal with my thoughts too, because you're watching this video.
Hello, it is I, Shmomipo, and I'm here to tell you, subscribe!
A Pokemon without many weaknesses or resistances won't be taking double damage often, but it also won't be taking resisted damage either. And how good this is depends largely on how good the stats of the Pokemon are. If a Pokemon is ridiculously tanky, like Porygon 2 or Cresselia, then hitting it with even strong neutral attacks isn't going to be enough to get rid of it quickly. You really want to hit it for super effective damage. With Pokemon this bulky, even strong super effective attacks often aren't enough to get rid of them in a single hit, but they at least do enough damage that another Pokemon can finish off these behemoths. The alternative is spending turn after turn chipping away at their health bars, only to have them heal off the damage half the time anyway. But Spiritomb was not graced with unbelievable stats. I would actually go so far as to say these stats are exceptionally believable. Thanks to its unusually low HP stat, it is much harder to keep it around. Yeah, Spiritomb won't be taking super effective attacks, but opponents don't need to use super effective moves to get rid of it. A couple of strong neutral attacks will certainly do the trick. Spiritomb's other stats aren't really making up for its shortcomings either. It is unusually slow and has really poor offenses too. Putting it all together, you get a Pokemon with I'll be generous, okay? Average bulk,
Aw.
bad offenses, and terrible speed. And its move pool wasn't especially great either, especially back when it had no weaknesses in Generation 5. It had almost no useful moves that weren't Ghost or Dark type, and it didn't even learn the move Trick Room, which lets slow Pokemon move before fast ones. Spiritomb has since been buffed to learn more useful moves as of Generation 9, but it still isn't enough to make up for its shortcomings, especially because nowadays it is actually weak to fairy types.
That's unfortunate that it took until Generation 9 for it to get actual buffs in its move pool. But that tends to be the case for a lot of Pokemon. It takes a long time for, I guess, Pokemon to remember, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't be treating them like shit. Have a couple of moves, you know?
Oh yeah, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you go ahead and double check to see if you are actually subscribed. Currently, only about 30% of the audience is actually subscribed, and I suspect that a lot of people are watching thinking that they clicked the button and not realizing that they haven't. So this is my announcement. I've come to make an announcement. Subscribing tells YouTube that you want to see more of my videos. So if you're enjoying this video, or you want to see more competitive Pokemon content, or video essays about the history of competitive Pokemon, or you want to watch me entering tournaments with some goofy Pokemon, subscribing is a great way to get more of my videos. Okay, so Spiritomb was bad, but Spiritomb is not the only Pokemon without any weaknesses. What about another Pokemon that shares Spiritomb's typing? Sableye.
Sableye!
Well, to be fair, Sableye is a lot better than Spiritomb. Out of all the Pokemon I'm going to talk about in this
Sableye, it gets Prankster.
video, Sableye has had the most usage by far. And that's mostly because in Generation 5, Sableye was given access to one of the single best abilities in competitive play, Prankster. Prankster gives an increased stage of priority to all non-damaging moves, causing them to move before most regular moves.
Oh my god, I've been trying Pokemon Champions. I'm dog shit, but I got prankstered by not a Sableye, but by the Whimsicott, and well, let's just say it encored one of my Mons into Protect, and I was like, oh yeah, that is what you do, huh? My bad, I needed to respect the Whimsicott.
For a Pokemon like Sableye, this was a godsend. Sableye has the same typing as Spiritomb, meaning it also lacks those helpful resistances that cause it to take reduced damage. Sableye, however, does have another way of reducing damage without using its typing with the move Will-O-Wisp.
Yeah.
This move burns whatever it hits, causing the burnt Pokemon to take damage over time and cutting the power of their physical moves in half. While Spiritomb does also learn Will-O-Wisp, its low base speed means it can't fire the move off before taking damage most of the time. Sableye also gets some other useful supporting moves like Fake Out and Taunt. I actually played against a Sableye in the US National Championships in 2012 that used the move Captivate, which, if you don't know what that does, no worries, neither did any of us back in 2012. This move hits both targets and will cut their special attack stat in half, but only if they have the opposite gender of Sableye. Pokemon like Thundurus and Tornadus are always male, so a female Sableye could reliably use this move against them, as well as any other male Pokemon. Just like Spiritomb, Sableye received pretty ridiculous move pool buffs in later generations, but I'm not going to talk about them here because in exchange for these new moves, Sableye also gained a weakness to Fairy, and that makes it ineligible for this video. I don't know why I'm shaking my finger so much, but I can't stop it. I seem to enjoy it now. Prankster saved Sableye from obscurity and actually gave it something to do. It took me like 6 takes to say saved Sableye. It's a lot harder than I would have thought. However,
Sableye.
even one of the best abilities in the game could only do so much. While Sableye was able to disrupt opponents, it was far from a great Pokemon, and that's largely because of its stats. Remember that for a Pokemon in the neutral zone, their stats determine a lot of how well they can stand on their own. Okay, so let's take a look at Sableye's stats.
Oh. If I can recall correctly, I'm normally not correct. Sableye has, I said less than 400, but I want to say it is 308. And I would only know that because I do nothing but play Kaizo Ironmon. Wiz, can you tell me if I'm right? Thank you, Mr. Editor.
Oh God. Sableye has less total stats.
Never mind. He tells me. It's okay, Wisp. I'm sure you are correct also. I guess I could have just done mental math on the other screen, but like, it's a React video, not a math class. It's okay.
then Munchlax, then Yanma?
Okay, wait, it has less than Yanma. Wait, hold up. You guys can't see that. I'm in the way. God damn. Ah.
Sableye's relevant stats are, across the board, not better than Spiritomb's. It has the same HP stat, and every single other stat is a meaningful amount worse, with the exception of speed, which Sableye isn't really using in the first place, and also isn't that much better. Spiritomb generously has okay bulk. Sableye generously has bad bulk. Not to mention, the offenses are just abysmal. Sableye's one saving grace is getting access to the move Foul Play, which uses the target's attack stat rather than its own. But against special attackers, this move is really not very impressive. If Sableye has to use its own stats for damage, it's not going to be doing much. And the bulk being this bad means Sableye is always a liability to have on the field. Sure, it's not going to be taking super effective damage, but you don't really need a super effective attack to knock Sableye out when the stats are this abysmal. Not to mention, Sableye's ways of reducing damage are...
Oh. Okay. Will-O-Wisp has 85 accuracy. Yeah. I forget when they made the change. I want to say it was sometime after maybe Gen 4 or 5. Yeah, 75 accuracy. And then somewhere along the way, they made the change. I remember someone telling me that they made the change because something happened in VGC where some dude missed Will-O-Wisp maybe 4 times in a row or something like that. But I never verified that, so you guys can just tell me in the comments or something.
Extremely inconsistent. Captivate was a fun tech option for a single tournament, but it was incredibly inconsistent against female and genderless special attackers. And once players heard about the set, they started making their Pokemon female on purpose. Will-O-Wisp was only 75% accurate.
Oh, he mentions it. Oh my god.
In black and white, meaning a quarter of the time the move would miss and your Sableye would risk going down before it could attack again. And that's not even factoring in landing the move only to have it immediately cured by the Lumberry item. All of this to say, while yes, Sableye did have more that it could do than Spiritomb, the lack of resistances and truly terrible stats more than offset the 0 weaknesses and great ability. Sableye is the best any of the true Pokemon without weaknesses has ever been. And the best that we can say about it is that at times it was usable, I guess. Spiritomb and Sableye are the most well-known Pokemon without weaknesses.
Yeah.
But they aren't the only ones.
They're the ones that I know. Just because it's like the most obvious ones, and plus my first Pokemon game was in Gen 3, and that would be Pokemon, you know, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. The other one I could maybe think of is like, I don't know, it's like ability based. That one electric type with levitate. Eelektross? Bleh.
There's a few more Pokemon that I'd like to talk about, one of which is a true Pokemon without any weaknesses, Eelektross.
I haven't watched this video yet. I really haven't. It's not pre-watched, I swear.
Unlike Spiritomb or Sableye, Eelektross gets rid of its weaknesses via a combination of its typing and its ability. Eelektross is a pure electric type Pokemon with
It's not pre-watched! I just remember some things!
the ability Levitate. Levitate makes the user immune to ground type moves, and Electric's only weakness is ground. Technically, yes, this means that Eelektross is still weak to Pokemon using ground type moves that have the ability Mold Breaker, which ignores other abilities, or, you know, any Pokemon using a ground type move if Weezing's neutralizing gases on the field. But in the vast majority of circumstances, Eelektross has no weaknesses. And that doesn't make it good. While Eelektross did see a little play during the first year of Black and White's competitive rule set.
I'm done guessing, by the way. Eelektross was my last guess. I swear. Okay, I swear.
Even going so far as to finish second at the World Championships. This
Real
was
proud of you, bro.
a technicality because that rule set banned every single Pokemon not introduced in Generation 5, so it was pretty different than a normal year. Ever since then, Eelektross has no major recorded finishes. Why? Well, we can use what we've learned thus far to understand what's holding Eelektross back. First, although Eelektross lacks weaknesses, it only has 3 resistances to steel, flying, and electric. This is an even smaller number of resistances than Sableye or Spiritomb when you factor in their 3 immunities. Offensively, electric is a great type, but a Pokemon having only a single type means their offenses are always going to have issues. For Eelektross, there are 3 types that resist electric and 1 type that's immune to it, meaning it's gonna have some uphill battles. Eelektross does get some decent coverage moves for the types that resist it, such as Flamethrower to hit grass types, Dragon Claw for the dragons, and Grass Knot for the ground types. Eelektross's best coverage move, though, was Acrobatics.
What happened to it?
A flying type move that doubles in power if the holder isn't holding an item. This move was strongest in Generation 5 due to items exclusive to those years called gems.
Yeah.
There was 1 for each type, and they would cause the first move you used of this type to become 50% strong.
I know about the gems because people like to tell me about the horrors of like flying gem acrobatics emolga.
Stronger and then disappear. Using a flying gem with acrobatics would not only make it 50% stronger via the gem effect, but it would also double the power of acrobatics, as acrobatics checked if the user was holding an item after the gem was already consumed, effectively tripling the power of the move. Acrobatics was a strong attack and also great at hitting Pokemon for neutral damage, and allowed Eelektross to have an actual strong offensive move for the Pokemon that resisted electric type attacks. Unfortunately for Eelektross, every gem except for the normal gem was removed the following generation, taking away one of its best tools. Eelektross probably still would have been okay if it had great stats. And while they're certainly better than Sableye or Spiritomb, they still aren't good enough. Respectable defenses and usable offensive stats, it's definitely good, but it's not great, and the speed stat is really awkward. Eelektross is slower than most Pokemon used in competitive play, but it isn't quite strong enough to justify using it as a Trick Room attacker. I think that if Eelektross was super fast, it probably would have had some play because the other stats are all good enough, but being this slow is just too much of an uphill battle for the Windsock. Also, side note, can we talk about how much worse Eelektross 3D model looks compared to its really cool 2D sprite? I used to think Eelektross was like one of the coolest Pokemon.
Yeah. I think it's probably due to the fact that in the pixel sprite, like he's standing. Hold up.
Compared to its really cool.
Yeah, because he's standing here, but like in the 3D model, a lot of the models that float or levitate and that kind of stuff are kind of birds, so they're always like there. I guess at least they flap their wings, I think. Or they at least hover. But I guess to show that it's levitating, they just make him fly all the time?
Cool 2D sprite. I used to think Eelektross was like one of the coolest Pokemon based on its design. And then I saw it in X and Y and I was like, oh, I can't let anybody know that I like this thing. These are technically the only Pokemon that have no weaknesses, but there's a couple other Pokemon I want to talk about still. Pokemon that can end up in situations where they don't have any weaknesses, even if they aren't always in that state. And well, yeah, there are probably some setups you can do with like the move Trick or Treat, which adds the ghost typing to a Pokemon, or I don't know, like Soak with a Rindo Berry on a Lightning Rod Pokemon. I'm more interested in a much simpler method that a huge chunk of Pokemon can use to end up with no weaknesses. Terastallization. Terastallization allows any Pokemon to forfeit their original typing defensively and transform into one of the 18 types, getting a damage boost to their Terra type, as well as being treated as a pure version of whatever that type is defensively. With Terastallization, suddenly any Pokemon with the ability Levitate can turn into a Pokemon with no weaknesses by Terastallizing into an electric type. And yet, this was extremely rare. If the main thing holding back the true weaknessless Pokemon was their stats, then why are the Levitate Pokemon with better stats still not choosing to shed all their weaknesses and become untouchable? Well, it turns out that resistances matter a lot. Like a lot. And like we've already established, electric is not a type you want to terastallize into if you want resistances. For example, let's look at Hydreigon, a dark and dragon type Pokemon
That is quadruple weak to fairy.
with the ability Levitate. Hydreigon could Terastallize into Electric and turn into a Pokemon with no weaknesses. However, the resistances that Electric provides to Flying, Electric, and Steel aren't super useful for Hydreigon. It wasn't weak to any of them initially, and it already resisted Electric. Instead, when Scarlet and Violet first released, many Hydreigon chose to run Terra Fire, allowing them to get a damage boost on their Fire-type moves and suddenly resisting the Ice, Bug, and Fairy-type moves that Hydreigon is weak to in its base form.
That makes a lot of sense. The reason I remember that Hydreigon is quadruple weak to Fairy very, very well is because one time in a randomizer for Gen 5 that I played, I bumped into a Pokemon on the enemy team, the enemy trainer. I got hit and I got one shot. Reasons. The enemy trainer's Pokemon randomized its ability into Pixelate. Yeah. I lost my cool dragon. Yeah.
The Ice, Bug, and Fairy-type moves that Hydreigon is weak to in its base form. Terra Poison could also be used as a way to resist Fairy as well as Fighting-type attacks, especially because Poison's weakness to Psychic is an immunity before Hydreigon Terastallizes. Steel was arguably the most popular option when Hydreigon was used, although it shares a weakness to Fighting with Hydreigon's original typing. Ending up with 10 resistances, 2 immunities, and only 2 weaknesses is a pretty sweet deal, especially considering that Steel resists every single other one of Hydreigon's weaknesses except for Fighting. And all 3 of these Terra options also make use of the Levitate ability, since all of Fire, Poison, and Steel are weak to ground. They don't turn Hydreigon into a Pokemon without any weaknesses, but they each only have 1 or 2 weaknesses, and you get a lot more value from the resistances than Electric can offer. This isn't specific to Hydreigon either. Nearly every single Levitate Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet favored a different Terra type than Electric, whether for defensive reasons or offensive ones. Electric, while a good type, just wasn't the best choice for a defensive Terra type when comparing the resistances that other types could offer. There was one major exception though. Terra Electric Cresselia won a regional championship at the start of the 2024 season. While Cresselia primarily preferred other Terra types such as Poison or Fairy, this Cresselia leaned into its neutral zone dominance. It was primarily here to support its teammates with Trick Room and Lunar Blessing, so it didn't need to worry so much about its offenses. And with the Electric Terra, it could turn off all of its weaknesses, relying instead on its ridiculous stats and healing from Lunar Blessing to keep it healthy. And clearly this strategy worked, since ultimately this Cresselia won the tournament. It didn't really catch on in a big way, since most players felt that the resistances gained via the other Terra types were worth a couple of extra weaknesses, but it did prove that a super bulky Pokemon without any weaknesses could actually be pretty scary in the right hands. But there's another Pokemon I still want to talk about. A Pokemon who, thanks to its ability, has absolutely no weaknesses, or at least that's true as long as it has full HP. It's one of the newest legendary Pokemon, Terapagos. Terapagos is a legendary Pokemon with 3 forms. There's the cute form made to sell plushies, the regular form, and the stellar form. Here's something that I think is kind of stupid. The regular form of Terapagos is called the Terastal form, which is not the name of the form when it terastallizes. I'm going to call it the normal form because I think that that's less confusing. The plushie form is fully irrelevant competitively, and the stellar form is...
I like calling it the plushie form. The plushie form, it makes it cute.
The strongest, but the form I want to talk about today is the regular form. Terapagos, when it's in its normal form, has an ability called Terra Shell. This ability causes the first instance of damage dealt to Terapagos to deal not very effective damage when Terapagos has full HP. This is different than abilities like Multiscale, which merely halve the damage while the user is at full HP. For example, a Multiscale Dragonite taking an Ice-type move would have it deal twice as much damage compared to 4 times. But if that same Dragonite somehow had the Terra Shell ability, the Ice move would instead deal 50% damage instead of 200%. This ability is phenomenal, and it's a big part of why Terapagos was a major threat the first time it became competitively legal. Terapagos is a normal type Pokemon, and normal doesn't have a single resistance, just that lone immunity to Ghost. With Terra Shell, Terapagos is actually able to resist every single type in the game.
Well, hold up. I'm covering the disclaimer. For the first attack. There we go.
and players made this count. Many players would use this ability to boost Terapagos' stats with Calm Mind, letting it deal more damage and reducing the damage dealt by future special attacks. Giving Terapagos the Leftovers item and pairing it with Pokemon like Grassy Terrain Rillaboom or Floral Healing Comfey or Pollen Puffamungus could also allow it to heal tons of health over the course of the battle, sometimes even getting multiple uses out of Terra Shell in a single match. Being able to resist every single type in the game, even once, turns out to be a pretty big deal.
That seems
Terapagos'
pretty good.
only weakness is fighting, but leaving your fighting type Pokemon on the field against a full HP Terapagos is incredibly dangerous, as you aren't able to do super effective damage until the shell is broken. And if you lose your fighting type Pokemon before dealing super effective damage to Terapagos, many teams no longer have the damage to get rid of it. Bringing your fighting type Pokemon in the back isn't a perfect solution either, as these teams have a lot of support to keep Terapagos healthy, and they can threaten damage or status condition if you ever try to switch your fighting type in. Terapagos also clears the bars that Spiritomb, Sableye, and Eelektross were struggling to get over. It has great stats, especially after it Terastallizes, and a very solid move.
Let me move out of the way. Let me move out of the way. What? Those are the stats.
Pool with great coverage moves of most types in the game, as well as a phenomenal signature move that's strong both in and out of Terastallization. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Terapagos was so strong. It's the first time we've truly had a Pokemon that made use of having no weaknesses without having to deal with any of the drawbacks of having no resistances, that also wasn't hindered by poor stats or a bad move pool. Of course, it isn't truly a Pokemon with no weaknesses. It only has no weaknesses when it's at full HP and it's in its normal form. But I think this is the first time we've ever actually seen just how scary a Pokemon could be if it had no weaknesses and also was, you know, like actually a good Pokemon. And that's
No weaknesses and actually good. Yeah, that's like the main distinction, unfortunately, for, you know, Spiritomb and Sableye and Eelektross.
why the Pokemon without any weaknesses aren't actually any good. If you enjoyed this video, I really think you're going to like this other one that I made where I talked about how Zacian, who was once the strongest Pokemon in the game, maybe the most powerful Pokemon ever made, has since fallen off and become completely irrelevant.
I remember using Zacian even when I played Sword and Shield competitive for like not very long. Just like I talk about the only time I ever played competitive because I had a friend like coach me. It was towards the end of a Sword and Shield like life, I guess, and it was, I remember Kyogre and Ground Team were extremely prevalent. And guess what? Getting attack boost kind of just for free is kind of nice. All right. Oh, it's over. Heck. Okay. Hi. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Anyways, if you guys want more, let me know in the comments below if you guys want me to watch that video he just recommended or any other videos. I have more time now to go through YouTube comments because before I didn't have that much time to actually go through YouTube comments. I have more time now. Let's just leave it at that. Bye, 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 bye. Subscribe.